Welcome everybody to Creative Retail Talks. I'm so excited this morning to be talking to Crafty Chica, Kathy Cano-Murillo. We're going to have a great discussion this morning. Hi, this is Clint O'Rear. Thanks for joining the Creative Retail Talks podcast today, where we will be discussing the latest in life, business, and retail. So Kathy Cano-Murillo is an author, artist, and founder of the award-winning brand Crafty Chica. She spreads the gospel of glitter, literally through her DIY projects and figuratively through her speeches, workshops, books, and essays. A former syndicated columnist for the Arizona Republic, she is now a full-time creativepreneur, which has led to multiple Crafty Chica mass retail product lines and collabs with many national brands. She has authored 7 craft books, 2 novels, and recently Forever Frida. She has been featured in Forbes, the New York Times, BuzzFeed, and much more. Kathy is Mexican-American, a native Phoenician, mom of 2, a wife, and owner of 3 Chihuahuas. And Kathy, my favorite description of you is a crafty version of Selena meets the Hallmark Channel with a dash of Oprah optimism. I love that.
You gotta visualize, right?
That's great. That's great. So Kathy, welcome and thank you so much for being with us today on Creative Retail Talks.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And I tell you what, just reading your bio makes me tired. So I'm excited to talk about today how you do all this.
Oh my gosh, there's several methods to it.
That's awesome. Well, so we'll kind of start out talking about your story, and then you also, Kathy, you have just some great principles that I know have been a big part of your success, and so we'll talk about that as well. But let's go back to childhood, because I know there was a key moment in 5th grade that really provided a foundation for your creative journey. So tell us about that.
Well, what's funny is there's actually 2 different moments that I feel really help shape what I do.
Okay.
Before 5th grade, I remember, and we remember these things. I don't know why this kind of stuff sticks out to us. Well, I remember loving art class, like in 2nd and 3rd grade, even 4th grade. And every time it was time for the parent-teacher conference, I would take my parents, we'd go in the auditorium, only to find that none of my pieces from art class were hung on the walls. And
I can't even believe that. How's that even possible?
It was really crushing because I loved it and I was so excited about it. And I told my parents and they came wanting to support me. And it's like each year, and I just, that kind of stuff sticks with you. Like, I'm just not good at this, but I love to do it. And it wasn't until 5th grade that, I was still very insecure, like probably one of the only little brown girls in all of my 5th grade in the area where I grew up. And we used to have to write these little short stories and draw a picture with it. And there was one day when my teacher asked me to read my story out loud to the entire 5th grade. And when I was terrified, but once I started reading my story and I could see how engaged everyone was and just the light in their eyes listening and the way that they clapped at the end, I loved that feeling. And I guess I must have anchored it in my heart or just in my subconscious, because that was always kind of like my goal for everything, that feeling of just connecting with people and breaking down those types of barriers of what made us different and finding that magic formula of what connected. And I always just relied on that. I was like, at the time I was like, oh, it's my stories. But looking back, I see it was my willing to share my creativity. And that really became the foundation of everything that I do, is just sharing my creativity with people to help them be creative. It's universal.
Yeah. I love that. That's so cool. And I tell you what, Kathy, I would say you are probably one of the most creative people that I know in the industry. So that's awesome that you are sharing that with others and really, I think, building community with that, which we'll talk about in a few minutes.
Yeah, and I think it was just I've always been a hyper creative. And I think that was a little much for the third grade art teacher. And I just remember in high school, like taking crafts class and never wanting to use the patterns that they gave us. And I would work up my own patterns and I would get marked down on my grades for that because I wasn't following along. And I just, went into my young adulthood, like just feeling insecure about my creativity. And it was like my secret thing that I love to do, but I never really shared it with anyone because I was scared they would make fun of it or think, who does she think she is? And it wasn't until I met my husband and we became friends, and he's an artist. He's a trained painter and everything. And he's like, you know what? Who cares? Just make stuff and just sell it. And I was manager of his band, and I would have my craft table. And some nights I made more sales than the whole band made for their gig.
Wow.
So it was pretty awesome. And that's when I knew, okay, I'm just going to do my thing and I'm not going to worry about what anyone thinks.
That's awesome. So that was some pretty good affirmation there that you were making more than the band, right?
Yes. And I knew I was a good business person because I also would take 15% of the gigs that I would book for them. So I was making money from the gig that I booked for them and from my table sales. So all of that played into what I do now of just, monetizing all the things.
Yeah. So tell me, let's dig a little deeper into kind of that phase of your life for a minute. I know you went from making those creative products in the early days to a period at the Arizona Republic, writing a newspaper column there. And I don't want to reveal too much. I want you to tell that story. So kind of tell us about how you went from making those creative products in the early days to how you ended up at the newspaper.
Well, my husband and I, we eventually got married, and on our wedding night, we both said, let's make a living from art, music, and writing. Like, let's just figure it out. Like, we don't want to work 9-to-5 jobs. We met at the traffic court, working at the traffic court. So we were like, we'll never do that again. And we started making Latino-centric home decor and jewelry items. This was in the early 90s, and there was nothing like this out there. There was no internet or anything. It was, we connected with a sales rep, and she took our samples to the National Gift Show in New York and in LA. And within 3 months, we had over 300 accounts for our handmade goods. And we'd had our first baby and then the second baby. We did this for 2 years, and it was so much to handle. It took all the love out of it. And what it did teach me was batch production. I really learned how to do batch production. That's, got to have a takeaway from the failures, right? That was my big takeaway. Sure. And it was awful because there was no PayPal, and our customers' checks would bounce and the stuff would break during shipping. And my husband was like, I don't want to do this. This isn't what I had in mind. And I go, I know, me too. And I thought, well, what is the other thing? Okay, writing. And I've just always been the type where I just go for it. All they can say is no. So I got a job in the tear sheet department of the Arizona Republic. I had been writing all through high school, since 5th grade. I was on newspaper staff, yearbook staff, and I just applied for the news clerk position in the features department because I love entertainment. And I ended up getting hired. I had none of the credentials except a lot of spirit. But the editor, she told me she had my flower pot on her desk that she had bought at a local store. And I knew that was like a good sign. But at the end of the interview, she said, oh, I really need to hire a journalism student. And I'm like, that's okay. I'll be in the basement in the tear sheet room. And she called the next day and she said, I just have a feeling about you. Let's do this. And that was such a game changer for me, realizing that, well, everyone's going through the front door, through the traditional path. it's always worth a shot to see if there's another way in. And that was my other way in. And it led to me going to night school to finish my bachelor's degree. And I started writing a celebrity interview column that got syndicated. So I was interviewing like Ewan McGregor and Jake Gyllenhaal and Renee Zellweger. And
That
then
is so cool. That right there
it's
sounds
so fun. And then I started doing this craft column, and the craft column at the time, Martha was everything. Like, she was really starting to get very popular. This was like in the mid to late 90s. And the home editor was like, yeah, we need to have a craft column. Like, everyone's into this home, DIY thing. Trading Spaces had come out on TV. And I thought, wow, but I can't put the Virgin of Guadalupe on everything because it's general market. This would go out to like all of Arizona's newspaper subscribers. And it taught me how to design for a general market, but still have my own style. And within a few months, the column got picked up by Gannett News Service. So here I was with a national celebrity interview column and a national craft column. And I loved it. I went to night school, finished my bachelor's, and I just had this feeling like, I know I'm meant to do something. I just thought, is this it? Like, is this the peak of everything? And the turning point was when I had an editor who just really did not bring out the best in me at all. I really felt like she limited what I could do because I was always stressed out because she was always mad. And I just started thinking, could I do something with this Crafty Chica thing? Because I launched it at nighttime while all the family was asleep. I had my newspaper columns, and I thought, wow, if I could do something for myself outside of this job and use what I learned through my job and apply it, maybe it could be something. And, I got my first book deal, my second book deal. And the time came when I went to the craft convention, and I literally asked my book editor if I could get a free pass to sign books in their booth, sign my books. And she let me in, and I just walked the show floor. And the next year I was invited to speak. And I went with the intention, I'm going to walk out of here with the product line. I know I am. It's going to happen. And I made my own product samples. It was already mine. I just prepared for it. And sure enough, that's what happened. But the glitch was that I would have to leave my newspaper job. And, I grew up middle class, Mexican American. Like, the whole thing is to get a job with a 401k and retirement. And I made a wish list for the company, and they accepted all of it. So I was able to leave the newspaper and be a national spokesperson for Duncan Enterprises, which was tacky glue. That was like my favorite glue. And they found me because I would blog about it all the time. So that's really the turning point. It was in 2007. And I just knew that even though I loved my job at the paper, I just felt like there was something else that I was meant to do. And I didn't quite have a strategy plan. It really helped being the spokesperson because they gave me a salary. So it was a great transition. But it was sure the right decision because 6 months later, the newspaper started laying off just hordes of people.
Wow.
So I really left at such a good time.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I listened to my gut instinct and that I jumped, that I made that decision and took that risk.
Yeah.
You just really have to listen to your gut instinct.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. And I love how you didn't necessarily map this journey out. Really, your life's purpose just kind of led you down this path, it sounds like, right?
It did. And, at the time that it was happening, I was very much in disbelief, like thinking it was a stroke of luck or it wasn't going to last or people would get burnt out. And it was kind of, the struggle we all go through as we're doing things. However, I never stopped creating content. I never stopped reaching out to people who engage with me online. I love social media. I love being able to go to 4 different platforms and say, look at these earrings I made. Here's how you can make them too.
Yeah.
So that really was help keep me, building my brand while I worked on the inside of realizing like, yes, I am meant for this. I worked hard for this. And now I know what I'm doing. It just, there's a lot of inside work and outside work that has to go on at the same time.
Yeah. And I know you were one of the early adopters of both a blog and social media in the industry. So talk about that for a minute, and especially about the social media, because I think you started on MySpace, right?
Yes.
And depending on the age of people listening, they may or may not even know what that is.
Oh my gosh. I know. Well, even earlier than that, like I remember reading an Entertainment Weekly magazine. This was before I even worked at the newspaper. And they were talking about the internet and websites to go to. And back then the URLs were like 1,000 characters long. You just type it in, and we all had AOL. And I launched our first Yahoo store for our artwork. That was amazing. It did really well. No one was shipping online, and Yahoo had this great platform for that. And then when MySpace came around, it was just so fun. That was like the first back and forth type of engagement community. And then Facebook came, and I realized it was such a different personality than MySpace was. And then of course Twitter and YouTube. So I just joined all of them like as soon as they came up. And even to this day, I'm like, when TikTok was really popular, I was like, no, I'm not going to do TikTok. Like, that's okay. I got to draw the line somewhere. That's for Gen Z. That is not for me. Mm-hmm. And then a couple months ago, the TikTok people reached out to me and they hired me for their Creative Learners Fund. And I just finished up 2 months of sharing content on TikTok. And so it did really well. I had my first ever piece of content that had over 1 million views, short form video. So I'm just, you have to really embrace all the different platforms and see their opportunities, and not think, oh, it's just another one. I don't have time for it, or I don't want to do it, or I won't fit on there. I really did make it a priority to show up and share. Show up and share.
Show up and share. That's a great phrase right there. I like that. You need to copyright that. That's good. Yeah. Show up and share. So, well, I love how you had the vision early on to participate in social media and continue to evolve with it. Continue to show up and share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know that's been a big part of your success. I want to come back also to books for a minute, because I know as your journey evolved, you got into writing several books. And I heard you describe one time how you develop your plots and characters. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've always loved to write short stories, essays, first person, blog posts, diary posts, all of that. I think I was a mom blogger before there was even the term. But yeah, I have a lot of different ways. I had always wanted to write fiction. And, in this world, I just think we have one life. Let's do all the things we want to do, all the things we're curious about. And having my blog and writing consistently, it made me, look appealing to book editors, because I would write about, oh, I'm working on this novel. And, the first one was really, really hard. I had like 24 rewrites on it, but it led to a 2-book deal. I did not give up on it. And as far as developing the characters, I'm born and raised here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I read a lot of books, and I love contemporary women's fiction. And I love stories like How to Make an American Quilt, or just, stories with a female cast. So I decided to write books like that with Latina characters. And the struggle with them isn't about heavy duty type of things like immigration or gangs. And, we see a lot of those are very important topics for us to, appreciate and read and take in. But for my life story, mine was about friendships and, having different kinds of struggles of your parents not understanding what you wanted to do when you're creative and that kind of support. So I wrote 2 novels themed around characters like that.
Mhm.
And I'm really proud that they fit into, the American Latino fiction library, because it just shows diversity and range in all of the different types of stories. And then the Frida book came up, and I'd taken a pause from writing books, and an editor from Simon and Schuster contacted me, and she said, we would love for you to do this book on Frida Kahlo. And I was like, count me in. I love Frida. And I went to Mexico City and did the research, and Frida was like the queen of all things crafty. Like, everyone knows her for her paintings,
Yeah.
but she was also very crafty. She did embroidery, she did paper mache, assemblage art, and a lot of people didn't know that. So it was really fun to have a different type of book, talking about her life.
Yeah.
And yeah, and now I have some other projects in the work too.
That's great. That is awesome. So I think one time I heard you describe that a lot of times with your characters, you kind of connect them with the emotions behind crafting. And when I heard you
Yes,
talk about that in an interview, that was really powerful to me,
yes.
because I think, I know you and I both spend a lot of time in the creative industry, and that is one of my favorite things about it, is what it
Why
does to
we
people
craft.
emotionally. So talk
Yeah.
to me a little bit about that,
Oh, definitely.
because I think that is so powerful.
You know, so we working in the craft industry, we're all about making things and sharing ideas. And the novels that I wrote are about the situations and experiences that make us want to craft. Because usually when we craft, there's an emotion behind it. You're excited for a birthday, or you want to show how much you love someone, so you make something cool. Or maybe you want to start a business and you don't want to open a cupcake shop, but you want to do a scrapbook store. Like, there's always that emotion that brings you to want to make something. A lot of times it's for self-reflection or for affirmations, like with lettering and the phrases that you choose to write that you want to see. And so I really use the books and their characters that showed why they turned to crafting, like what was the emotion that pushed them to where they needed to release that energy and feeling through creativity, and how it helps, because it really does help. I mean, all of this stuff with the election and the news, I just turned off the news and I started painting coffee mugs because I do ceramics. Instantly, I just felt the stress melt away, and I got in my happy zone again.
Yeah.
So I definitely like to relay that in the stories of, what is it that what is the story that makes someone go sit down to create something?
Yeah. Hey, I think you're onto something. I think you just came up with an idea. We could just have elections decided by a craft war. Just
I
have
know,
to
yes.
do a craft war, right?
Yes, or just make little kits, craft kits, and then just go to the protests and hand them out and have everyone sit down and make a card to give to one another.
Yeah, exactly. I love that idea. I
Craft
bet
for
that
one
would change
piece.
the world right there, Kathy.
Yes.
That would change the world. So we're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic right now. I imagine as we roll into 2021, it may not be much different, I'm afraid. Tell me a little bit about kind of your perspective on how do you think this emotional connection with crafting has helped people through this crazy 2020 and this
Oh my
worldwide
God.
pandemic?
It has been a savior for a lot of people. And I recognize this, and I mentioned this earlier to other people before, but the first time I really noticed the power of crafting and easing tension was when 9/11 happened.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time, like, my site traffic went up. People were looking for projects to make at home with their families. They really turned inward to recognizing what is most important to them. And I was just so happy to come up with ideas that people could do at home with their families. And then again, in the recession in 2008, it happened again, where people were looking for more meaningful content. And when the pandemic happened at the end of February, I started thinking, you know what, could we really be on lockdown? Like, would that really happen? And when it happened, I'm like, I need more craft projects. So I just started posting projects, and sure enough, oh my gosh, my site traffic went up immediately because people were looking for things to make, things to do. And whether if it was for, stress relief or a side hustle to make extra money, or, homeschooling, there were all of these different reasons. And, one that really stuck out was the whole journey of the mask, because when it first started, people didn't want to leave their house. So they would take their bed sheets and they're like, how do I make a mask out of this? And so I researched, like, here's the different ways to make a mask from a bed sheet. And then 2 weeks later, I need to make 100 masks for my local hospital. Okay, here's how to do batch production. 3 weeks later, how do I make, I'm making masks to sell in Etsy. Now I'm a business owner. Like, to see that journey of how quickly it evolved, that was pretty crazy. And another thing I did was, March was National Craft Month. And I decided, as a way to introduce other Latina and Latino makers to the community, I started a night called Corazon Craft Night, which is heart. Corazon means heart. And so every Thursday, I would have 8 to 10 Latino makers go on Instagram Live. And it was like, instead of a blog hop, we did an Instagram Live hop. So I started it off. We all had 15 minutes to share a craft. So I would show my craft, and then I would send all of my followers to the next artist, and they would go on, right on time, do their 15-minute craft, and then they would send all of the followers to the next person. That was so successful.
What a great idea. That is so creative, and just in terms of the flow.
Yes, people loved it. And I did it for 10 weeks. And then once the quarantine was lifted, it started to get more difficult to get people to sign on because they were busy doing other things. But we're going to do another one for the holiday season. But it was just such a fun time. And so you could have one night in a period of 2 to 3 hours and walk away with 9 different tutorial projects live with the artists, where you could ask questions. One guy showed how to do shading. Another guy showed a magic trick. This one girl showed weaving. Someone else did how to care for plants. Like, it just, the word craft, it was just open for, a lot of, but there's a lot of sewing tutorials, painting tutorials. One girl, she spun it off into a nightly painting class. So she did 100 nights of paint tutorials on Instagram Live. She had hundreds of people every night, and she started on Corazon Craft Night on our first night. And it went so well that she took her own, made up an idea for her to do, and she did these 100 nights. So it was so really cool. Amazing. Yeah. It was just such a fun way that for all of us to connect and take our minds off of things and just create together.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
So it really is making the best. And I also co-own a retail boutique here in Phoenix.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes. It's called Mucho Mas Art Studio. We're going into our 4th year, and we had to shut down. I mean, it's a very successful business. During April and May, we closed. And then during June and July, we just opened on Saturdays to sell masks. Like, the mask sales were more than any other sales. And then we shared a space with the candle shop, and he left. So we ended up acquiring his space. So in the middle of the pandemic, we doubled in size our retail boutique and gallery. And, we reopened on October 2nd, and it has been amazing. And, yes, there is a pandemic, and we follow proper procedures. So many people are allowed at a time. You have to wear a mask. I've been doing a lot of virtual art classes. There's just a way to make it work.
Yeah.
You just have to think it through and make your strategy and follow through with it. But there is a way to make it work.
Yeah, I agree. You can be safe, be smart, but you can still do a lot of those activities that bring people joy.
Yes.
And I truly love how creativity and arts and crafts have helped people so much through this pandemic time. And I love how you've blazed the trail on that, Kathy, and really.
I love to see people launch their businesses, and especially on TikTok. So many successful TikTokers are like, wow, I lost my job in March, and now here I am. I have a full-time business making cards or, making handmade journals. And they started it during quarantine because they could send it online. So, it's really cool that we have all these tools and resources to help us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Kathy, I love the journey you've been on from third grade to today. and what a beautiful, amazing, successful journey that it has been. I hope you enjoyed our conversation on the Creative Retail Talks podcast today. Be sure to visit our show notes page for more information on today's show. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, reach out to me at clint@creativeretailtalks.com. Creative Retail Talks is all one word. That email address will also be in the show notes. Hope you have a great day.